Michigan regulators are ordering hundreds of medical marijuana dispensaries all across the state to shut down, including some here in West Michigan. State leaders say the 210 businesses all failed to apply for their state licenses by a mid-February deadline. Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs released the total number of stores today, 2 weeks after it began issuing cease and desist letters. More than 150 of those shops are in Detroit, but some, like we said, they're in the Muskegon, Battle Creek, Allegan, Berry County areas. Michigan is in the process of licensing marijuana businesses under a law that took effect in 2016.
Talking about Michigan and the medical marijuana program that has been slowly catching these deadlines from the law that was passed in late 2016. We're going to go ahead and read a couple things here. We have Michigan orders 210 medical marijuana dispensaries to close from AP. Michigan regulators said Thursday that they ordered the closure of 210 medical marijuana businesses over a 2-week period, largely because their owners failed to apply for a state license by a mid-February deadline or did not receive authorization from their municipalities. And if you remember, I covered this story about, like last week, when they did the same thing to 40 dispensaries. And a lot of this has to do with these overlaps of municipalities that haven't opted in, don't have regulations, and you have to have those before you apply to the state. In some other cases, there was people that hadn't applied to the state yet, and they were looking like that was pretty risky to be still operating without an application in by the February 15th deadline. Most of the shops, 158, were in Detroit. Authorities also hand-delivered orders to 8 businesses in Lansing, 7 in Flint, 5 in Gaylord, 3 each in Ann Arbor and Battle Creek, and smaller numbers elsewhere. Shops that did not close immediately could be denied a license down the line if they apply, be referred to local, state, or federal law enforcement, or face other penalties or sanctions. So that should give you an idea of where we're at in Michigan just hearing that. The state is very aggressively and heavy-handedly taking over the old dispensary system that was in Michigan. And so when you're talking about these 210 businesses, I can't imagine what other businesses besides maybe processors that make large volume processes of like extracts or medibles maybe. But outside of that, I really don't know who else would be shut down in this situation, because the people that grow are all growing under the caregiver system, which they only can grow 72 plants maximum. And they are no longer allowed. They were really never allowed to legally sell to dispensaries their extra cannabis from growing weed for themselves and their patients. So what it comes down to, these are basically dispensaries for sure, most of them, almost all of them. And the the regulated system isn't even close to coming online. And this is the old dispensaries that were already operating before the law, the regulation deadlines came around. So there was basically no new dispensaries that has started that didn't have somebody that was a previous owner of a dispensary. Have people like that put license applications in to the state or to their local municipality? I don't really know, because they haven't really reported. We don't really get detailed reports about stuff like that. But I have seen another news article where the guy was basically like, he put his application in, and he was just a caregiver in the old system. So his application going in, as far as I know, there's very few people like that, or maybe I really don't know, because there's over 400 people that put their application in, so we'll see. But this 210 number is something like half of all the applications that were put in, but this is because they failed to apply for the state license. So if these guys didn't apply for the state license but there's also people that did apply for the state license, but they don't have municipal backing back in their municipality. Or, you know, so this is that. So that's a big chunk of the applications that are in. Quote, we had our team scour publicly available information to create a list. Then we cross-reference it with those who did turn in applications, said David Harns, spokesman for the State Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, which includes the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation. The cease and desist orders came as the state continues the process of more tightly regulating the medical cannabis industry under the 2016 law that aimed in part to address confusion surrounding the legality of dispensary shops that opened after voters in 2008 authorized marijuana for medical use. The new law includes a 3% tax on provisioning centers. But I mean, it's more than just that. It's like the application process and getting regulated. And if you're into that sort of thing, they send you these books basically of consultants that you can contact that handle everything from, you know, insurance to fire safety and getting your building up to code for doing whatever you plan on doing or whatever. So it's, you know, the regulatory system is coming in really heavy and really hard. So the tax is kind of just a minor part of it. And by the way, when we talk about their 2016 law that aimed in part to address the confusion surrounding legality of dispensary shops, the other things that it was worried, you know, that it addressed was the medibles, which is the, you know, medical marijuana food items, and concentrates, because since they weren't illustrated, like, you know, they weren't defined specifically in the old 2008 law, the police and the courts decided that they were not legal under that law, which is ridiculous because everything that is considered marijuana is considered medical marijuana under the law. So I don't know. There's a lot of problems with the way that they continuously picked at the 2008 law and said that it was too vague and it didn't really illustrate that you could be like, for example, a patient wasn't allowed to sell medical marijuana to another patient. A caregiver was only able to sell or provide medical marijuana to their patients. So there's a lot of problems with just the reading of the law and it being a little bit vague. But one of the issues could have been addressed just by doing what was already being done anyway. For example, the biggest one in my opinion is that the law allows a grower to grow other people's plants, but they're only allowed to give them a really small amount of a harvest or whatever. I suppose you could give it to them, you know, and then when they run out, you can give them the rest because you can hold on to a certain amount for them. They can get 2.5 ounces and you can hold on to 2.5 ounces. And I mean, out of 12 plants, that's only, you know, that's 5 ounces out of 12 plants. It doesn't really add up. So caregivers were basically stuck with an illegal amount of extra meds on hand. And what they were doing was they were taking this so-called overage to dispensaries, which were completely, according to a 2012 Supreme Court ruling in Michigan, operating illegally the whole time. But they were allowed to operate. Oops, sorry about that. They were allowed to go, and you know, local towns made their own rules for them, kind of, you know, made their own little systems for them if they could, or they didn't even do that. They just allowed them to be in operation. I mean, whatever, medical marijuana was running pretty good like that, but they could have just legalized that, made it so that caregivers could basically sell their overage legally to dispensaries, get it tested at the lab and whatever, and they could have just done that. And that could have still allowed for bigger producers. So I don't know. I don't know why they didn't just do that. Well, I mean, I know why. Because there are some big producers in the background that are going to get in on this. And they were, as I reported, steering the licensing board and the medical marijuana board the whole time on all the decisions they made concerning these, like, you know, limits and fees and assessments. So anyway, moving along. So they're saying that licenses will be issued or start to begin to be issued by June 15th. Initial licenses will be issued by June 15th. Now, we've heard that they might start issuing them in April, and apparently they're attempting to issue them because they've already churned a few licenses down, from what I understand. Some 215 businesses that submitted a pre-qualification license application had the appropriate sign-off from local clerk attesting that they can operate temporarily while awaiting a state license. Harns said that 210 shops that were ordered to close did not apply for a license, applied too late, submitted an application without their municipality's blessing, and that was to extend business to this next deadline, or possibly filled out some information incorrectly. And Laura is famous for kicking back shit if something is filled out incorrectly, even if it's just, even if it doesn't really change the data that's on the form. So, you know, knowing how complicated the application process was for this and how many pages it was and how much stuff you had to basically research and do yourself to just to fill it out, I'm sure a lot of it is that. But man, to go tell somebody that they have to close this because the application's a little off, that's one thing. But man, there's a whole nother reason why people are going to have to close, and nobody's talking about it yet, but it's going to come up. Quote, if it's considered an incomplete application, it can possibly be fixed, he said. Our team is receiving phone calls from people who have questions about this. If they feel like they've received a letter in error, we obviously have an open forum of communication with them. All right, we're talking about roughly 277,000 patients who are registered with the state to grow their own cannabis or obtain it from the 43,000 registered caregivers who can supply a limited number of people, which is 5 plus themselves, so that's 6 total. At 12 plants apiece is 72 plants maximum. But what this is there's a disparity big time here. Like many patients do not have caregivers. Pretty much having a caregiver is a rare commodity in the area where I live in. And being a caregiver myself, I'm always constantly getting badgered by people that wish they could have a caregiver. Comments section. I don't know what we're looking at here. People just trolling it with bullshit. So again, people aren't talking about this gap with when licenses start getting issued in June. There's going to be problems with people that are part of this regulated systems like inner circle, because they're going to get their dispensaries open, and the display cases are going to be nice and clean, and you know, the jars are going to be nice and brand new, but there's not going to be anything in them. The shelves will be empty. The inventory will be void of any cannabis, because that's when you're going to have the issue of, oh wait, we just gave the first grow license out, so there's no medical marijuana that's even been grown yet. So they have not addressed that in any way, shape, or form yet. But it is coming down the pipe. I can feel it coming. And it might be like that, like a regulated person that's connected closely to Lansing is going to be like, yo, these guys are down the road selling weed that who knows what is going on with it. You know, did they get it tested? When did they get it tested? Because these labs haven't even been around yet. Maybe they'll let them go retest at the labs when the labs come back online. Because it's not like Michigan didn't have our labs already. Michigan, I think, led the way in labs, if I'm not mistaken. And so all of a sudden, all the labs that have pioneered labs in the medical marijuana world, just all of a sudden they just get dissed. Or I know they all probably put in for their licenses and shit. But what about that? You know, like all the tests that they did before just goes out the window. I don't understand that part of it, but we're going to have that bump in the road, and we'll talk about it when we get there. And one more story about this. Michigan has yet to issue a single medical marijuana license. Now, back here, this AP article, I don't even know who wrote it, so who cares? But here we have Mona Zhang. I read from time to time, another author that writes for Forbes. Sorry about the commercials. Can't stop the pop-ups on Forbes. But anyway, here we go. Michigan, Governor Snyder signed the legislation. We know. So they're talking about a year and a half later, but that's kind of misleading, because the fact is like these deadlines have been kind of they've been in play since last winter, but it was like there's a reason for each deadline to be where it was, and they couldn't just slam it right down, because that would have immediately forced like the state police or something to have to go shut all these dispensaries down across the state. So they had to do these slow incremental deadlines to make sure nobody got basically just shut down right out of the gate. That would have just looked like bloodshed. And they know they're doing a corporate takeover, so they didn't want it to be like obvious. So anyway, they decided to add 2 more meetings to the schedule in an effort to try to expedite the process. They haven't issued a single license yet. And I mean, again, that's a little bit misleading, because even the state said as early as last November that the very earliest that you're going to see any licenses come out is probably April, and that's probably late April. I heard someone else say early April, but there's no way you could back that up. And the fact that they've already churned some down is like they're looking to eliminate rather than to see the ones that they're going to be like, okay, yeah, let's give this guy a license or whatever. So they're just going through there right now and doing the process of elimination. And of course, combing through the ones to see if they can find mistakes in applications or cross-reference it with municipalities to make sure that they actually can do business there. So they talked to Tim McGraw, who was seeking a dispensary license. He got in trouble with the 2 board members thanks to a misdemeanor marijuana possession charge that was expunged from his record. He disclosed a separate drunk driving ticket in his application, though. Quote, "I wasn't trying to hide it," he told Detroit Free Press, describing the process as extremely confusing. He said that he did not know he had to disclose the offense because it had already been removed from his record. And I mean, it's a misdemeanor. Like, who cares? And that's the thing about the state of Michigan's regulatory package. It isn't anything like where you've seen the marijuana reform politicians, and they're pushing laws that are like Cory Booker or the, you know, other people around the country that are trying to platform fixing the damage that the war on drugs did to the minority community or whatever. And in those situations, people are like encouraged, if you got arrested for some bullshit misdemeanor marijuana possession charge, yeah, we want to give you a license, because we know that you know, mark on your record probably made it hard for you to get a good job, or you probably might have not been able to get a student loan or something, and it could have derailed your college ambitions. So the Michigan law that they wrote in Lansing with a bunch of corrupt politicians, they don't give a shit about that. If you had a misdemeanor and they're not going to let you have a license, that's a problem, because that is bullshit, especially if it's not even on his record anymore. I mean, come on. He'll have another shot at a license during the board's next meeting. I mean, I don't think the board's going to ever get desperate to actually license like enough people to ever fulfill the needs of the medical marijuana demand in Michigan. They don't care. All right. When they first started writing these laws and then they passed them, I made videos about all this shit. And all along, from the very first day I made the first video about Public Act 281, 2, and 3. Every time I made videos about them, and from the first one on out, I've always said that this could either be two things, and neither one of them is good. It's either A, a corporate takeover. They're going to just try to take it over and give it to their buddies, probably the prohibitionists that tried to take it over before. They tried to take over the whole thing with a ballot initiative back in 2016, ran by their organization was called Responsible Michigan. Yeah, it was either that or even worse, they're just trying to just basically kneecap the whole thing so that the medical marijuana fails in Michigan. You know, safe access reduces opioids. They know that. And they don't like that. Michigan is a huge, big pharma consumer. It's a huge, big pharma moneymaker. There's a lot of big pharma in this state making money. They don't want, they don't want to see their profits taking this hit anymore. If they can fight back, they can fight back. And this is one way they're doing it. They're taking the knees right out of the medical marijuana program. Like it or not, they got a former state police sergeant on the medical marijuana licensing board. All right, if that tells you anything to kind of strengthen my argument on that point. More than 400 people have submitted applications to get pre-approved while they seek community approval. More than 140 businesses have received community approval and submitted full applications. So it's hard to really vet out the numbers, but it feels like there's still a couple hundred applications that are in contention that haven't been really dealt with yet, or they could potentially be part of a wave of the beginning of finally getting some approved, maybe. I mean, we have 140 right now that we know of that have received community approval and have full applications submitted. How much longer do we got to wait to see if even one of those get accepted? Michigan has one of the largest medical marijuana programs in the nation, second only to California in terms of patient numbers. The program also received one of the highest grades from Americans for Safe Access. In a recent report, the patient advocacy organization scored the programs on patients' rights, access, ease of navigation, functionality, and consumer safety. And believe me, you don't get a high report from Americans for Safe Access if you don't have good labs. That's consumer safety. Functionality, that means you go to a dispensary and it's got everything you need. It's not just some head shop with weed for sale. Ease of navigation, I'm not sure about that, but access and patients' rights are pretty high they're pretty high. This is all before. Now that this new regulation stuff is coming in, this is all going to change. That's the only results I see from this. Patients' rights, we hope patients' rights aren't going to change for the worse. I don't really see much that can do, you can't really damage that much. Like I've heard someone say, oh, how are they going to make Michigan worse? Are they going to fucking make it so you can't smoke weed now? No, they're not. They better not. There's no way you can do that. All right. Access. This is going to be a huge problem. All right. This is going to make access a major issue for a lot of people, especially right out of the gate. You heard that guy up in West Michigan. A lot of dispensaries got closed there. Flint, a lot got closed there. Detroit is where most of them got the closing notices. This isn't good, man. And like I said, the next bump is right around the corner. Ease of navigation. If there ain't no dispensaries, there's not really much you can navigate. Functionality, same thing. If you don't even have dispensaries, what's the point of worrying about how good the serviceability of them are? And we don't know what the new regulated dispensaries are going to feel like or look like yet, because no one's seen one and no one's seen the product staffed inventoried into it. Consumer safety, the consumer safety thing will probably be unchanged, if not improved a little bit. Michigan makes its emergency rules permanent, it will have one of the strongest programs in the country, read the report. However, good laws on paper do not always translate to quality patient access. Now, when they're talking about the emergency rules, they were talking about when the dispensaries that were existing already were about to get closed down because The regulations basically required it. And they ended up getting to stay open with these emergency rules. And these emergency rules are awesome. I mean, it still lets dispensaries basically deal in caregiver overage, as far as I know. Maybe not. It didn't specifically spell it out like that, but it said existing products could still be sent through the pipeline. It was but those rules do expire in June, and that's because they expect that they're going to have regulated, licensed marijuana businesses open by then. We will see. Many municipalities haven't been nearly as lethargic at considering cannabis businesses within their borders. In recent weeks, 4 dispensaries have received zoning approval in Ann Arbor. Lansing approved its first medical marijuana business application on Wednesday. Any businesses that receive local approval still need to obtain a state license. But Detroit, the state's most populous city, has been battling voter-approved marijuana initiatives and has delayed licensing every step of the way. It took an emergency order from the Michigan Court of Appeals in February to force the city to begin accepting applications. Those in the industry say that Detroit stands to lose millions by fighting voter-approved initiatives aimed at opening up the market. Well, yeah. I feel like we're jumping off a cliff here, and who knows what good it's going to be. Who knows what good is going to come of it. Obviously, there's going to be some people that make a lot of money off of this situation, because in and around those municipalities that don't allow dispensaries and grow facilities and all that stuff, there's a lot that do. But by and large, the lion's share of the tens of thousands, actually it's like 30, I want to say there's either 2,500 or 3,500 municipalities in Michigan, probably 2,500. And you've seen the numbers. Out of all those municipalities, only like 430 or less people, 400 in the teens, I think. It's not 420. Have put in applications. That's not very many. And out of those, hundreds of those, like over 250 of them, don't have local approval yet. That's because these local people got together and they had town hall meetings, and they had a bunch of old Reefer Madness type clowns get up there from the church and shit, and they just basically, ran the same Reefer Madness. Oh, this is going to bring in the derelicts of society, and this is going to make the kids want to smoke heroin and meth, because they're all going to be on weed, and that's not going to be good enough anymore. And then everybody's going to drive into the walls and crash into each other because of the stone driving. I mean, it was at every meeting there was in the state. That was the same. That was it. There's your talking points for every meeting in the state. And the ones that had people that were pro-marijuana might not have even shown up at the meeting. Sometimes they didn't even have to have the meeting. They just talked amongst themselves at the town hall. And this is what we're doing, man, in Michigan. So, all right, man, that's all I got on this. We're jumping off a cliff. None of this, there should have been an emergency rule a long time ago. If Laura has the power to do these things, why couldn't they ever make a rule just to say that caregiver overage is okay to sell at the dispensary or take to the testing lab? That would be all you need to do to solve the whole problem. Well, no one even sees this as being a problem yet, but maybe in California they're going to work something out with this regulation overreach thing and beat it back some enough to where the vast majority of operators there can't operate anymore because of the regulations, but they're continuing to anyway. And it's like, you're gonna have to do something. Either A, you go out there, sorry about that, you go out there with a brute force of like police and just crack skulls and throw a lot of people in prison, or B, you figure out a way to let them people in. And I don't see why you would think that that's a bad idea. Oh yeah, because there's big corporate types that want to come in and take over big chunks of the market share, and they can't have a bunch of little operators everywhere doing, taking away their business. So we know all this, and it's ridiculous because we've always been fighting against big pharma because they were the ones that were doing we want all the market share, What is it? If you're talking about medical marijuana, they want all the market share on pain pills. Hell, they want all the market share on epilepsy medicine. Even though they know their shit don't work and people are dying or losing brain cells trying to do their medicine that's no good, when people can just use cannabinoids and not have any problems or side effects. And, that's the way that Big Pharma has been doing us, and now we're getting done like that by our own industry. Big operators that want to crush the little people out of the game completely. It's just absurd, man. And so where are we at? We're at a place where legalizing marijuana means we're finally going to bust all you growers that, especially in California, we've basically turned a blind eye and let you do this for the last 40 years or more. Now all of a sudden we're just going to start cracking skulls. That's what legalization is starting to mean, guys. And it's pretty much in the background, deep down inside, in the heart of hearts of it, is a corporate takeover. That's all I got.